Howdy, it's Kyle talking about where in each state would be my top spot to live. So here I will just use my own opinions and not have to think about anybody else's thoughts and feelings. And if you've watched the channel for a while, you'll probably know some of these, but what I'll do here is just go over each state. Instead of doing a rapid fire, I'm going to do a 3-part series where I just do the first states here, Alabama through Kentucky. And if I choose a smaller town or a suburb, I'll just say the name of that town. If it's a bigger city, maybe north, south, east, west part of town. And for the biggest cities, down to a specific neighborhood. But yeah, let's take a look at just where my top spots would be to live in each state. I'm going to start off with Alabama and go through the states alphabetically. I live near the northeastern corner of Alabama. I've been to that part of the state many times. It's very beautiful, a lot of parks, and the place I would live if I could live in the state would be Huntsville. It's near the southern extent of the Cumberland Plateau and also near the southwestern extent of the Appalachians. There are about 230,000 people there. It's been growing quite a bit in the past few years. It is kind of the bright spot economically and growth-wise for Alabama. It's often considered one of those hidden gems where it's got a low cost of living, a decent job market, and a fun downtown and interesting things to do. And I can see why people would want to move there. If you're familiar with Chattanooga, it's kind of like that, but without tourist attractions. Within the city, I'd like to live in the eastern part of town, east of downtown, not too far from Montesano State Park. So that would be a nice spot to do my daily walk and also be relatively close to downtown to hit some of the interesting restaurants. So Huntsville, fastest growing part of Alabama and the part I would choose to live as well. Okay, for Alaska, this is one of 2 states I have not been to, the other being Hawaii, so I don't really know exactly where I'd want to be. But I do know I want to be in the south central or southeastern portion of the state where it doesn't get that cold during the winter, and because of its slightly lower latitude, the winter days aren't that short. So with that, I'm going with the town of Kenai on the Kenai Peninsula. There are about 7,500 people that live in the town, and it's kind of a twin town with Soldotna, which has about 4,500, so roughly 13,000 between the two. Kenai is about a 2.5-hour drive away from Anchorage, so you can go to the big shops there and stock up on things. But the town itself is small, but it is large enough to have some of the most basic services you need right there. So check out some of these houses and neighborhoods in Kenai. This is pretty nice. I could totally do this. There are a ton of opportunities for outdoor activities in the area. There's hiking and backpacking in the mountains right there. I can get myself a sea kayak. So again, I'm not familiar with Alaska, so if you are familiar with this part of the state, let me know if this is a good choice for someone who's not familiar with Alaska. But yeah, for right now, I'm going with Kenai. Now heading down to Arizona, I'm not a huge fan of Phoenix. It's one of my least favorite big cities in the country. I think some of the other areas are just maybe too touristy, maybe too small of towns for my taste, but for my choice for Arizona, I would go with Tucson. There are about 555,000 people that live there, and it's been growing quite a bit. There are over 1 million in Pima County. I like the downtown. It's okay. It's not the best, but for a Sunbelt city, it is relatively walkable. Because of its elevation at 2,500 feet, it doesn't get as hot as Phoenix during the summer. It certainly gets very hot, but not as bad, and the winters are really nice. Within the city, I like to be on the east side, east of downtown, east of the district where the University of Arizona students hang out, more of the older established homes. When you think of Arizona, you don't think of older established neighborhoods, but there are some pretty interesting ones in Tucson on the east side. Not exactly walkable, but reasonably close to the Sam Hughes district, which is pretty fun. And if I'm going to be living in a house in Tucson, I want it to have southwestern architecture. So not exactly the most urbanist place in the world, but more urbanist than Phoenix, and if I were to move to Arizona, it would be to Tucson. Next up is Arkansas, and very similar to Alabama, most of the state is struggling, but there is one part that is doing well, and the bright light for Arkansas is the northwestern area, and that is the part I would move to, specifically Fayetteville. This is the south end of the NWA that includes the other towns of Springville, Rogers, and Bentonville. Fayetteville has about 95,000 people. It's growing, and it's a home of the University of Arkansas. Basically, all of the major players in the economy for the state are in this part. So you have the University of Arkansas again, but you also have the Walmart headquarters, Tyson Foods, J.B. Hunt Trucking. So as a result, more economic development and growth, and Fayetteville is a nice little city. And here's another city where I'd want to be east of the downtown. I'd like to be near the Mount Sequoia Woods. Beautiful scenery in this region. I'd like to have easy access to the mountains. There is a nice downtown that is very student-oriented, but it isn't just student stuff in the city because, again, it is growing quite a bit, so there are plenty of other people that aren't students that need fun stuff to do. And you may have noticed this is the 4th one in a row, and they're all going to be like this, where I choose a detached house. Now, I don't need a big house or even a yard, but I do want detachment because a big part of my life is listening to music loud. But type of dwelling or not, kind of like Alabama, I'm going to follow the masses to the one part of the state that everyone's moving to, and for Arkansas, it's Fayetteville. Okay, now for California, my home state, I know it more than any other state, and the place I would want to live changes back and forth a lot, but it's always in the same county, and right now I'm going to say San Luis Obispo is where I would choose to live. The city has about 50,000 people, and the county has about 270,000, and there's pretty much flat growth. And I've always loved the city of San Luis Obispo itself, but also the entire county. Although it is still very expensive, it is the least expensive county along the coast between the two major big cities. I've mentioned in videos where my favorite town is Morro Bay. That's the kind of coastal town just a few miles away from San Luis. But I think for living, I would take San Luis Obispo. It's got a really nice downtown, great for walking. The town is relatively compact, so you can walk just about anywhere in the city. It's got some really nice older areas, some beautiful old homes to the north and northeast of the central business district, and that's where I would choose to live. I love the beaches there. Your two options for the climate are either warm or chilly. And even though the city of San Luis Obispo isn't right along the coast, it is a coastal valley. There are no mountains separating it from the sea, so it does still have that nice climate, although not quite as chilly as the coast. Now, we can't afford to move there and buy a house, but if I can move anywhere in the state, it would be to San Luis Obispo. Colorado is the first of many states where the place I choose might be a bit of a surprise, but if I could go anywhere in the state, it would be, believe it or not, Grand Junction. This is the west end of the state, west of the Rockies in the Colorado Plateau part of the state. There are about 71,000 people in the city and about 150,000 in Mesa County, and they're both growing at a pretty good clip, although like many places, they grew a lot more in the early 2020s and the growth has slowed down in the past couple of years. Like a lot of other cities in that 50 to 100,000 person size range in the Southwest, it can be a little rough, but Grand Junction's been growing a bit. It's also getting kind of bougie. But why I would choose Grand Junction is because I like that scenery in the part of the state. I like having access to Utah more than the Rocky Mountains. I'm more of a Colorado Plateau, Utah National Park kind of guy than the 14ers, so I do like having the access to the Moab area and those beautiful parks. But of course, I also do love the mountains, and Grand Junction is close to those too. So, Grand Junction, not as expensive as Denver or Colorado Springs, not dumpy like Pueblo, not snobby like the ski resort towns. It's just a pretty nice big town out there on its own and where I would choose to live if I could be anywhere in Colorado. For Connecticut, this is a state that I've been to, but I'm not super familiar with. I know I like to be kind of close to New York City, but not really in Greenwich. I'm not really a huge fan of Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, or Hartford, so I think the town that I would choose to live in if I moved there would be Stamford. I spent a half day there a couple of years ago. I thought it was pretty nice. The main street downtown has some outdoor cafes, interesting spots for walking around. There's a nice harbor there, some good seafood restaurants. And being an older town in Connecticut, some really nice older neighborhoods, beautiful old homes. There has been some slight growth there, not a whole lot. And one thing that's nice about Stamford is you have train access to New York City. And I can imagine I would take advantage of that quite a bit. And you'll probably notice that most of these towns, I'm choosing an older, established neighborhood with homes that are maybe closer to the downtown area. Rarely am I choosing the richest part of the city or where you have just the biggest homes. And plus, for us not having kids, we don't need some giant mansion. So for Stamford, some of these nice homes, maybe 100 years old or so, would be where we want to live. And overall, just Stamford is kind of a laid-back, small city and where I would choose to live anywhere in Connecticut. Now on to Delaware, and with Delaware you have basically Wilmington and the suburbs, or you have beach towns. I'm not a huge fan of Wilmington, I'm not a huge fan of suburbs, so if I'm going to be in Delaware, I want to be as close to Philadelphia as possible. So with that, I'm going in the northeastern corner of the state, east of Brandywine State Park. And these are largely suburbs to Philadelphia. It's about 25 miles to downtown Philly. But as is always important for me, having nice green space and park space nearby is great. Again, that Brandywine State Park is really nice. And you're also at the fringe of large metro in this area, so if you go just northwest of here, it starts to get pretty rural. So for Delaware, I thought about the beach towns. I like Dover more than I should, but in the end, I would go with the northeastern corner of the state and be as close to Philadelphia as possible. Okay, so now going to Florida, not one of my top states for a place to live. It's just always hot and humid there. And certainly urbanism isn't the first thing you think of with the cities, but for Florida, if I could choose anywhere, it would be St. Petersburg. And within the city specifically, I would choose the historic uptown area north of downtown, south of Crescent Lake. And this type of older neighborhood isn't what you normally find in Florida cities, but I do like this neighborhood. So even though historic uptown isn't exactly ancient, it is well established. Other benefits of St. Pete, there is a nice city beach there, but you're also close to Clearwater, which is the busier, more popular beach, but you don't have to live there. You're also across the bay from Tampa, some more urban type things going on there. So when you look at Florida, this part of St. Petersburg is pretty much the only kind of sort of walkable neighborhood in the entire state. Of course, I'm not sure how much I'd be walking around there, especially in the summer, but if I could be anywhere in Florida, it would be St. Petersburg. Okay, going one state up to Georgia, a state I'm very familiar with. I live just north of the state line. I do like Atlanta, but not sure I'd want to live in the metro area, so where I'm going to pick for Georgia is Savannah. It's not exactly coastal, it's slightly inland on a river, but you do have some really close barrier islands with some nice beaches. There are about 150,000 people in the city, and it is growing slightly. Although it's often compared to Charleston, South Carolina, it's much smaller and not growing anywhere near as much. Like most other cities, I want to be in a more established neighborhood, but for a place like Savannah, some of those neighborhoods are really touristy, people going by in their horse and carriages looking at some of the beautiful old homes. So I don't want to be in those types of neighborhoods, but where I would choose to be in the city would be near Midtown. Because the oldest parts of the city are from the 18th century, you can be in parts of town that are 19th century, and that's not the oldest part of the city, but still pretty old. You have fewer tourists here, nice shaded, quiet streets, lots of green space and parks nearby. And with it being an older city, it is relatively walkable because the blocks are pretty small. I probably wouldn't go down to the tourist area too often, but I would take advantage of it sometimes. But if I had the option to move anywhere in Georgia, it would be to Savannah. Alright, now going out to Hawaii, the other state where I've never been to. But I think as a place to live, I'd probably have to be on Oahu. I'd feel kind of claustrophobic being on the lesser populated islands. Within Oahu, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to be right downtown Honolulu or near the Waikiki tourist areas. So looking at maps and Google Street View of Honolulu, I think I would want to live to the northwest or northeast of downtown in some hills overlooking the sea. So these are some of the streets and those neighborhoods I was talking about where I'd like to live. Now this is obviously not where the millionaires have their mansions on the beach, but this is pretty cool for me. Just like Alaska, there's nowhere you can be in Hawaii and not have easy access to the beautiful mountains. Lots of parks, lots of rainforest, lots of spots you can get back there in the wilderness. But you also have a big city with big city stuff and a big city airport to get back to the mainland easily. So yeah, for Hawaii, Honolulu might not be the sexy choice, but it's what I'm going with if I could live anywhere in the state. Now going over to Idaho, you have three choices: Boise, medium-sized towns, or the middle of nowhere. So for here, I'm also going to go a little unsexy, and I'm going to go with Boise. It's a case of kind of like Honolulu, no matter where you are in the state, you have easy access to mountains and wilderness, but here you also have some nice urban amenities and a pretty fun city. And for the city, I'd like to be in the north end. This is the more historic, older, established area. It is very expensive in that part of town, but it is walkable with easy access to downtown. There are about 240,000 people in the city. It's growing a lot. The metro area is growing a lot. The state is growing a lot. Most of the growth is in the suburbs, which is pretty soulless, but there is some character in the north end of Boise. So this is another case of enjoying reasonable walkability, nice established neighborhood with easy access to wonderful outdoors. Okay, now going over to Illinois, so you have to think, do you want Chicago or somewhere else in the state? And I do like many of the other parts of the state, but if I'm going to move to Illinois, I want to be in one of my favorite cities, and that is Chicago. Within the city, I would go to the Avondale neighborhood, which is northwest of the CBD. To go with the trend, this is an older established neighborhood with detached homes that are pretty modest. With smaller homes on smaller lots and narrower streets, it's just more walkable with the blocks being so small. Just to the south of this district is the Logan Square area, which is much more cool, hip, and trendy, but also busier. East of Avondale is Wrigleyville, which is another cool, hip, trendy area, but also much busier. So for me, Avondale is being in the heart of the city, a really cool area that's quiet, laid back, not as well known. But that's not to say that Avondale itself doesn't have its own little main street, its own cool mom and pop shops. So you can walk to the corner market, walk to your basic things there, then walk a little bit farther to go to the cooler spots in Logan Square and Wrigleyville. It certainly isn't off the beaten path for Chicago, but it is a very interesting neighborhood and where I'd move to if I could move anywhere in Illinois. Heading next door to Indiana, I thought about three different specific spots. One to be just barely over the line from Illinois in Chicago suburbs, one being in Evansville in the south end of the state along the Ohio River. But in the end, I did go with Indianapolis, the capital and biggest city. And within the city, the part that I would go to is north central part, north of downtown near the Broad Ripple and Rocky Ripple areas. So similar story here, older established neighborhoods, reasonably good for walking. And also with easy access to Broad Ripple, an older established fun hip district. But one of the things I like about Indianapolis is that there are several different magnet type neighborhoods like Broad Ripple to have cool, interesting things. To the east of downtown, you have Massachusetts Avenue, a part that's been gentrified a little bit, some newer shops and restaurants. To the southeast of downtown is Fountain Square, another area that's been gentrified with some new shops and restaurants. And to the west of downtown is the independent city of Speedway. It has its own little cute downtown, some mom and pop shops. So with downtown in the center of the city, you have interesting neighborhoods to the north, east, south, and west. So Indianapolis isn't my absolute favorite big city, but I do think it's very underrated and my choice as a place to live if I would go anywhere in Indiana. Now heading over to Iowa, a state that doesn't have any big cities. And my choice for Iowa might be a bit of a surprise to viewers. I've talked a lot about Dubuque and the driftless area, the northeastern portion of the state, which is very nice, but if I were to move to Iowa, I would move to Cedar Falls. This is one half of a twin town type area with Waterloo. This is located northeast of Des Moines, not too far west of Dubuque. There are about 40,000 people there with some flat growth, and it's home to the University of Northern Iowa. I like the downtown. It's very walkable. Because it's a smaller town, you can basically walk around the entire city. And big surprise here, I'd like to be in an older established neighborhood not too far from the downtown. But with it being a college town, I also don't want to be in a part of town where the students have trashed all the homes. But being in this part of the state, you can easily get to the northeastern spots where you have the driftless area. We can also go southwest to get to the big city of Des Moines to do more urban type things. I would say Cedar Falls is pretty far off the radar. I haven't really heard anybody talk about it, but it is a really nice town and where I would go if I can go anywhere in Iowa. Now heading down to Kansas, I'm choosing a place not too terribly dissimilar from Cedar Falls. I thought about the Kansas City metro area or Lawrence. I thought about Wichita, but in the end I went halfway between, and that's Emporia. There are about 24,000 people in the city, about 32,000 in the county, and there's basically flat growth. This is a much smaller college town. It's home to Emporia State University, but doesn't really feel like a college town. It has a nice enough downtown, some interesting things there. It certainly punches above its weight of 24,000 people. You're close enough to the KC metro area, so if you want to do fun stuff in the city like shows or sporting events, you can do it pretty easily. And in Emporia, you're near the Flint Hills, a really nice area of some subtle scenic beauty in the east central part of the state. So another nice spot to enjoy some outdoors, although here the rolling hills aren't so wooded. So with Emporia, you have a nice Great Plains town feel, but close to one of the bigger cities in the Great Plains. I know I haven't exactly sung praise for Kansas on this channel, but this part of the state is really nice. If I were to move to the state, it would be to Emporia. And the last state I'm going to cover in this video is Kentucky. I like Kentucky. Louisville, Lexington, and Frankfort are nicer, bigger, medium, and smaller sized towns. But despite that, my choice to be for anywhere in the state would be right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. I don't mean that as offense to Kentucky, but I do like Cincinnati and would like to live pretty close to it. So if I were to live in the older towns of Covington or Newport right there along the river across from downtown Cincinnati, I could easily get downtown there by walking across the pedestrian Purple People Bridge. Now I know that both Covington and especially Newport have some pretty rough areas, some issues with poverty. So I like to be in one of the older historic established neighborhoods, but not one of the ones that's totally run down. And there are plenty of those to choose from. There are some nice older homes, some nice quiet streets, but again, really close to that Purple People Bridge where I can walk to downtown Cincinnati. Downtown Covington and Newport have a few interesting things themselves, but being across from the bigger city would be the bigger draw. So yeah, if I could be anywhere in Kentucky, it'd be right near Cincinnati. And most importantly, the Cincinnati chili chain places all have locations on the Kentucky side. So that was part 1 of the top spots in each state where I would live, and check back soon for parts 2 and 3, and I'll probably throw in a few international spots at the end of part 3. But if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography from a nerd. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out. I want to give a special thanks to my Superior patrons for their support. If you're interested in becoming a Superior patron or perhaps an Erie or Huron patron, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. As always, thank you very much.